All right, it's 7 o'clock, so we'll call the Village of Northport regular council meeting to order for June 13th. Let the roll call show that Hugh Cook is absent, all other trustees in attendance, as well as he's by Zoom, in person. Manager, clerk, and treasurer are also here for staff. The next item is going to be the approval of our council meeting minutes from the May 9th regular meeting, and those have been provided.
I move we approve the minutes with discussion.
Second.
All right, moved by Susan and supported by Barb. Discussion on the minutes.
I have one correction. In new business, section A, the discussion of on page, the name should be Joanne Cook.
Oh, okay. I missed
That's all I got.
Any other corrections? All right. Moved by Susan, supported by Barb to approve the minutes with the corrections. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nays? All right, minutes are approved. Next up is our agenda. Any additions or amendments to the agenda? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right, we have an agenda. Next up brings us to our public comment. All right, if anybody would like to make a public comment, you can either unmute yourself in Zoom or raise your hand in public, and we'll recognize you for 5 minutes. Carl, you're unmuted. Did you want to make a public comment? Okay, here you. Okay, hearing no comments, any correspondence? Okay. Moving right along, we've got our staff reports coming up. Clerk.
Have a financial sheet and bill sheet in your packet tonight. Just in addition to that, the treasurer and I did send out the 4th of July donation letter, has been sent out. We do have a band that will be playing before the fireworks, but not after the fireworks this year. Subject to change is the name of the band, so.
Oh, okay. It's terrible.
Confusing to get everybody out there and dance, right?
Subject to change.
Yeah, so we've begun the collection and the fireworks are on order, so. Who knows?
And are there cans in locations still? Are we doing that or?
Those will be going out probably
Okay,
this week
okay.
yet. Yeah.
Great.
Oh, and we did raise $100. Yeah.
At the 175th.
All right, excellent. All right, anything else for Joni? Thanks, Joni. Next up is the treasurer.
Just got the taxes pulled over, got the township taken out, and we're rolling on that. We'll probably get our warrants due next Wednesday, so we're moving along. Taxes will be up at the end of the month.
All right, thanks, Diana. Anybody got anything for Diana or questions? Okay, thank you. DPW, the report was in the Dropbox. I don't see Chris on there unless he's under someone else's name. So if anybody has any comments, otherwise we'll just move along to the.
Oh, big news on the water operator.
Oh, yeah, Josh did get his
Oh,
water
yes.
operator's license.
Yes, DM,
So
congratulations.
that's, yeah,
Big
big
deal.
news there. That's great.
Yes, and also big news that he is expecting the demolition of the hospital soon, and I think that was in something we prepared on. Is that it? That's in Sally's report, isn't it?
But in my report,
Yeah.
item number 3 is the
Yeah.
basic schedule of the site to change.
Oh, yeah, and, right, the two of you met with, no, I don't know, it was somewhere in here. But I did wanna just comment that, I saw, the owner of the hospital who told me that he was hoping that that Elmer's would have the lowest bid, but it had the highest bid instead. So, do we know what company is doing the demolition?
It's called Bay Area Demolition. I met with the gentleman, I believe he's the project lead. Issued a land use permit for them to complete the demolition. Should be completed by, they're hoping by August 15th. Contractually, they're obligated to do by August 3rd.
Do you know when they'll begin?
But they're actually probably beginning already, but you won't be seeing much of that work. That'll be interior work. And
It won't be a big bang for a while.
No, the big bang, what I'm calling the hard surface exterior demolition begins probably sometime after July 15th.
Okay.
That's based upon, what they think right now. The demolitions, you never know.
Excellent.
All right, all set with DPW. We'll move on to Marina. I don't see Bill in there, but his report was in there. Sounds like they're off to a good start.
Except for the boys.
Yeah, the biggest.
It's really been the problem with those have been weather or than
Yeah, the
anything
wind.
else. It's been too windy to do it effectively. And it wasn't until fairly recently that we had the anchor, the concrete anchors for the police. Had them a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
Well, why?
They had to be ordered and.
Oh, we had to order new ones.
For new.
Oh, okay, that helps explain it.
All right, that brings us to the manager zoning administrator.
And just for, I'm gonna read the entire 4-page report. Actually, the report's quite a bit longer than it normally is because there's been quite a bit of activity. The first 12 items really are things that have happened. If you have any questions on those, please be happy to answer them now or privately as you see fit. Zoning administration, there were 5 land use permits issued since the last time we had met. I've given an idea of at least 4 items that may be on the July meeting. And then the rest of the report is items that will be discussed tonight. What I'd like to do is for the discussion items, just give you a brief indication of the issue as I see it, and then welcome any conversation. Some of the things will be very short, some might be a little bit longer in nature. But I don't want to dwell on them too much, but what I'm looking for on the discussion items is just some guidance on where we go from here on. That's my report. If there's any questions, I
have a couple questions. One, are we gonna discuss the trash pickup stuff tonight or not? Cause you have it in this report and then I don't know if it's.
What I indicated in this report, it's, what I said in the report is that the village has decided, at least at this point, not to.
Township.
The township. The township has decided not to pursue a joint effort. And unless, I think the way I believe it was unless there's a significant groundswell desire that we pursue something, just not doing anything this year, that would be my recommendation, but obviously that's subject to any further discussion that comes.
Right, I know that people disagree with me, but I still would like to see the trash happen because that was something we budgeted. I know that we pushed it, but that was with the intent of finding out if there were ways to do it more economically, which I still think that we should do. But I'm not comfortable with agreeing to just not do it at all, and push it off again, which will then invariably probably get pushed again. I mean, I guess if we're gonna have a discussion as to whether it never happens anymore, then that's a discussion, but, for me, it was something that was already approved that people were expecting. And I still would like to see something happen, even if it's not with the township. But I still feel that the pickup likely needs to change to be a central location. despite people's concerns about mobility, because it's not financially.
The last conversation, I just actually spoke to at the housing task force meeting earlier this evening. Is Supervisor McMillan thinks it's possible the township would still be willing to go to participate in the joint effort, but to do so, they want some questions answered, and frankly, they're the same questions you raised. And I said to you at the time that a lot of it depends on whether or not the township is interested. For example, the question of, you know, how would we limit, you know, as, you know, Will was suggesting, township farm residents might bring in semi-truckloads of trash. And how would we deal with that? Well, one suggestion would be to limit that to, you know, a pickup truck per person, per residence or per son. We could figure that out as we went along, but a lot of it depended on whether the township was interested. If they're not, we can still proceed on the same basis as we were talking.
Well, to me, I definitely think that, I mean, we had budgeted, what, 20,000? And I mean, even if you have that, that's then still, even if the township isn't helping, or we take a quarter of it and that's what we're doing.
Should we put this in some spot on the agenda? Or-
I would suggest that we put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Because we have a long agenda today and, like Jim says, the
And we're not
questions
doing
that I
it this
heard.
month.
The questions that I heard when I was at the township meeting were similar to, you know, how do you limit it and, you know.
Right.
You know, they were somewhat concerned about people who can't get to the pickup too. But I think that, you know, we really need to have some idea of what we want. We can't just have it all depend on what receptacles are available. I think we need to have some discussion on what.
Well, we're not gonna do it in the middle of summer anyway, so I think we should push it. Let's not spend any more time on it.
That's fine.
And
I have
I'll
another
have it,
question.
I'll have it on the next.
I have another question, and it's not on here, but I just want to see if there was an update on the social district stuff.
We're.
'Cause I've been
we're
asked.
working- We're working on the map, finishing up the map. We
Okay.
had some problems with that.
Okay.
Particularly with identifying the common areas, but I hope to have that done middle of next week.
So next month.
Yeah.
We'll see something. Okay, thanks.
Just a comment on the childcare issue. And apparently it needs, again, another permit from Lara, even though they just did it, so
Yeah,
it'll be a little bit, so.
yeah, it requires licensure for, if there's a new operator, the new operator has to be licensed, so. When I spoke with the individual that's seeking license, her goal was school year, August, something like that. Yeah, keep your fingers crossed. Any other questions?
Okay, thanks, Jim. Committee? Finance?
The minutes from the May meeting were in the packet. We met yesterday, made a few tweaks to the budget that we'll be discussing tonight.
Anything for Jim? No, infrastructure, Laura?
The stuff that we've been discussing is on the agenda either through Jim's report or is discussion items already.
Okay. Planning commission?
The minutes from our May meeting were included in the packet. We have some planning commission discussion action items later on the agenda today. So if there weren't any questions on the minutes, we can move on.
NLTUA. I had attended by Zoom, but we had our audit report, which took up the bulk of the meeting, which was really good, really good. And it's the same audit firm that the township and the village are gonna be working with, so. Looking forward to getting those as well. And we're not gonna meet in July, right?
That's correct.
We'll take some time off.
Unanimous.
Yeah, that's possible.
Double seconded.
Yeah. Moving on to our discussion items. Okay, first up, we've got the village manager recommendation regarding joint housing.
Yes, and that, certainly, I would anticipate some discussion, but the main thing that I wanted to indicate is, since we talked last, about this was really 2 meetings ago, you recall we approved the concept of joint, of some form of joint housing commission with the township. And in the research that I've been doing, in particular, talking to developers that are actually doing this type of affordable or income-driven housing. The most important thing to assure that a project's going to go forward, that they can get from a municipality, is zoning entitlements. They call that, the developers refer to it as zoning entitlements. What they mean by that is to have in place before they start pursuing their financial, their capital stack, how they get their investors together, is you have to have the zoning in place to do the project. And so their suggestion to us was the first step in that type of joint housing commission would be to have a planning commission that was in a position to essentially approve zoning entitlements for a housing facility. And that's my recommendation, as we move forward with a joint planning commission that would be specifically addressed to the task of zoning for housing projects in and surrounding, in the village and the surrounding areas and borders.
Any discussion or questions for Jim regarding that?
So the scope of this joint authority would be narrowly defined.
Right.
And that responsibility would then be removed from the township or.
Not necessarily, but what the zoning, underlying zoning would function like an overlay district. The underlying zoning would remain, if somebody wanted to build, do a project that they didn't need any special consideration, any changes in the zoning ordinance, they could still proceed, as normal. But if they needed something different, maybe some contract zoning or even doing a PUD, that entity would be in a position to authorize that based upon the zoning ordinances of either the township or the
So,
and again, just like I said when we first discussed this, we have a proposal or we have the documentation prepared by legal counsel, and we would do that before we took any final steps to enact that.
So what this joint planning commission for housing recommends is counter to the previous zoning rules? Or the existing zoning.
That would almost certainly be the case.
Right.
I mean, that's the whole
Why
purpose
not?
of creating.
While-
That's the whole purpose of creating it, to give, if there is an impediment that would prohibit the project, that entity would be in the position to recommend a change that ultimately, if it was land in the township, that the township would approve, or was land in the village, the village would approve as final.
Okay, and these approvals would exist only for that individual developer, or would exist forever after?
Well, it would apply to the project and the
Project.
developer and the land in question. It wouldn't, for example, necessarily apply to the entire area that was covered by the joint commission, for example.
Okay.
It would only apply, they would generally be project driven. That's typically how joint planning commissions.
Or
so, would the joint commission meet regularly, or it would just meet if somebody needed us,
Probably
we needed
as
to,
necessary.
or, okay.
Probably as necessary.
And so if there wasn't a project, it wouldn't have to meet, but it
Right.
needs to exist and have members. Okay,
Yes, exactly.
So it's not setting new policy, it's creating exceptions.
Well, it could make recommendations, for example, to make changes to the existing zoning ordinances, yes, it could make those recommendations. But its primary function would be to, I hesitate to call them exceptions, but to permit a entitlement to that particular project, yes. Because that's, like I said, that's one of that is the main impediment that government creates for affordable housing. Everybody that we talk to said that that's the most important issue for government. The second one is related to it, but it's finance, like having a payment in lieu of taxes ordinance, having a neighborhood improvement association. All those things can also be done. But the first step they suggest was creation of a joint planning commission.
Would this be a subset of each planning commission that would then form this joint planning commission,
Could
or
be,
everybody?
it wouldn't necessarily have to be, it could be that it'd be completely different people altogether. That would be something that you will end up deciding as to how that will play out.
that was a question that was at the planning commission meeting, and the indication there was that we would probably try to have at least one member
Yeah.
from our commission, so that there's representation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how it worked the last time that I was involved in one, exactly. We had a couple members of each planning commission and then other community members that joined in.
It certainly would be helpful to have people who were familiar with current zoning and with the master plan. So that we didn't have to train an entirely new group of people.
Yeah. I was almost thinking it would be nice if the majority of the members were from each planning commission and then only one or two members from the community. I don't want to give too much responsibility, but if it's only gonna meet, every so often, I guess we can continue to think about it. And, if there's anything else, you'll have more information for us, or you'll, communicate with the administrator. I saw you put your hand up, Nicole. I mean,
Yeah, I can't ask a question, can
Not efficient.
I? No?
I'll,
My question just would be, and it's for my own understanding, I understand what you're hearing from developers, but what's the advantage for our municipality or their municipality? These aren't shared properties. To me, it seems like it's adding a layer. What's the advantage of having township, say, influence on our zoning decisions? Or what's the advantage for the township to have us sitting at the table for their property?
I think the advantage is it addresses an issue that's common to both governments, and both governments need to address. And trying to address it at cross purposes is not always the best way to proceed. And I also think it's a very, very good way to start. One of the things that I indicated in my original interviews, I thought that collaboration between the township and the village is essential. I've even heard people say, we want to get rid of the village, people just want to create a charter township. Well, before that happens, let's start working together. And I think this is an ideal way to do that, to start that process. And has that aspect, that doesn't even address the question of housing per se. It's just how do we work together?
I do like that idea, and we've done some of that over the last couple of years, but to me, it feels like it muddies it a little more, but.
And the other thing too is sometimes there might be a provision of the village ordinance that would be useful in a township project, and they can use that as a reference. And the other thing I will tell you too is really good, where joint planning commissions are really good, is to avoid the go ask mom thing where, you know, okay, the village is not gonna give it to us, but we'll just move it out of the township and they will give it to us. And that way you avoid that kind of playing one against the other thing, because they know we're together on this issue. And it stops that in its tracks. So.
Thank you, Chris.
No, yeah, absolutely.
So, I just want to bring up a concern that's been with me for a little bit, and that is that out in the community, very few people understand what's going on here. They don't think either, they don't think anything's going on, or they assume something bad is going on. And so, as usual, I think that some thought to bringing the community into, you know, what we are doing, what we want to do, would be a good idea. Just informing them, letting them know who to talk to, that kind of.
And in fact, I've spoken to several of you individually and indicated, I think that's what needs to happen. You've asked me, what can I do to help with housing in the community? And it would be to talk to people, say, here's what's going on. If you have a question, the office is at 116, you know, Weston Avenue. I'll talk to the village manager and they'll answer all those questions.
But I think some open fora might be,
I think that'd be-
not
that'd
the
be a
out
good
line
idea.
either. Hard to get anybody in one place, but
And the other thing, it's hard to get people to, and it's the comment that I made tonight at the housing, is when you're talking of, everybody wants housing. Everybody will say, I'm in favor of it. You get 95% agreement with that. But then it's always, yeah, I want it, but I'm not there, not that kind, not this, whatever.
Right.
That's what happens. And until you actually have a project, you're not gonna get people, and what you're gonna hear is, this was all done behind closed doors, which is a bunch of baloney. It's not been done behind closed doors. We've been doing it, talking about it at these meetings, talked about it, and, you know, people were invited to come to a housing task force tonight. And there were lots of people there. Lots of people.
none of them under the age of 65.
Well, that's because that's just Northport.
Yeah.
So I don't dispute that, what you're saying about this, you know, this appearance that it's all happening behind closed doors. Well, it's not. But people want to believe that, there's nothing I can do about that.
Go ahead, Susan.
The developers of these projects are not guaranteed to get what they want from this joint commission.
No, of course not. Of course not.
But you say that they want something like that to consider there. It's like a zoning board of appeals, but
I wouldn't call it zoning board of appeals. It's a planning commission that has some flexibilities.
it's not doing any planning, it's doing responding. It's responding.
I think that that'd be a fair, but yes. But again, part of what that commission do was identify the areas that they want to be included in that.
Yeah, I can think of a perfect example where this might come in. I mean, it's been talked about ad infinitum, and it's gonna happen at some point where the township is going to need to relax the 10-acre minimum situation, and it's
Absolutely.
most likely gonna happen. You know, I would imagine they would do it in areas that are adjacent to the village, but we would want some say in that, or some coordination. You don't want the township acting unilaterally saying, we're gonna get rid of the 10-acre minimum thing, you know, where we want to, and we're not gonna talk to the village about it. That's a perfect example of where this, what Jim's proposing would come in. Another one would be the possible Bremen Hill development.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, or not Bremen Hill. I'm gonna start all kinds of rumors.
Northport Point of View.
Yeah, that's what comes today.
Point of View.
You know, so that's.
Which hill are we talking about?
No, we're not talking about any hills.
Oh.
No.
What are we talking about?
The baseball.
Yeah, you bring up such a great point. I mean, we have to live with this idea that what happens in the township affects the village, and what happens in the village affects the township, and we can't think of ourselves as these two separate entities. When it comes to things as important as this, it's almost, we owe it to everybody to do our best, and this is definitely a way to move towards that. And the other thing is, this is not coming from nobody. this
Yeah.
is a recommendation from people that have done this.
Yeah.
They're saying this is step one. And unless we've done something better, I think we should start with their first
And
step.
the other thing, again, not to put too fine a point on it, but at one citizen made a comment at tonight's meeting. We've been talking about this forever and doing nothing about it. This is the first step of doing something about it. Can I guarantee you it's gonna get a housing development here? No, I can't do that. But is it gonna increase that likelihood? You're darn right.
Yeah, I certainly, I would be happier if it were a commission that would meet a few times and say, what are the impediments currently in our zoning that we can,
Yeah. And it's
that we
certainly-
can change or eliminate?
Our
Or
regular planning commissions do that, though. I
You
mean,
do?
like, that is what we.
do that.
That's what we're there doing. I think one thing to me, this is my understanding, but also this is a commission that can have some flexibility in discussion with the developers, correct? Whereas like a planning commission, if you want to put in a housing development, you can talk to the ZA and you can come and talk to the planning commission, but either you fit the zoning or you don't. And if you don't, then you have to go to a ZBA or a variance, to get a variance or whatever. And that's your route. And my understanding is that this is to allow some flexibility so there can be recommendations so that that makes that easier, which then, I mean, I could see how that would be very appealing to developers because instead of going, oh no, that's gonna be a battle because I already see I would need variances on 10 things or whatever it is, then they go, oh, there's a commission that I can talk to
Yeah,
and see and
that
get help
sounds good.
through this. And it's more of a discussion instead of a yes or no, or, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of consultants will tell you that contract zoning PUDs are evil. I do not agree with that one bit. I think they're absolutely good. They're good things because you end up getting a project that you actually want and like, rather than like you say, that would require not just a variance, but a rezoning in order to achieve it. And that's what will be permitted with this type of.
I
Well,
like
and
your
people,
description.
well, and people know, I mean, developers know that if you are going to go that route, you are going to probably hit roadblocks. Like, if you have to go and you're going in and you know you need variances or rezoning, that could be something you don't even do. And again, from a financial perspective, that's not very appealing to have to get really far into the project to even be approved to do it. So having something that can help people initially makes it like, oh, well, this is something that's probably possible.
And you're creating a commission that is absolutely tasked that as an objective, to find ways to do things rather than to find ways not. So,
Do you need us to do anything to cause this to happen?
no, what I really was hoping tonight was, to make a recommendation and get a feedback, and I've got quite a bit of that. That'll help direct, the efforts that we put into this. We'll be bringing back a proposed, it'll take the form of an agreement with the township, and then we'll also have to make or each municipality enacts an ordinance that permits it, and then you have an agreement that describes how it takes place.
Well, I'm comfortable giving you the go ahead on this. I think.
Well, I mean,
We don't.
let's,
Okay.
let's have him
You
meet.
don't need
Yep.
to vote on
This is just a discussion
Yeah.
item, just a discussion.
It's really more than anything else giving me direction on, I can take things by myself only to a certain point, and I really need to hear from you. And that's what these meetings are for, and it does permit us to do exactly what Barbara's talking about, is to raise these issues and create the awareness, in the public that this is an issue we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And we'll have, I hope, multiple conversations over the course of a lengthy period of time on this issue and tweak it as we go along.
And I'd just like to ask that an informational item be placed on each planning commission agenda. So the planning commission is brought along in the process of what the council is planning.
Sure. That's a good idea. It's a great idea. Okay. Anything further discussion on that matter?
Doesn't sound like it. Thanks, everybody, for that. Item B is presentation of the revised Northport Village zoning ordinance.
The main thing that I wanted to get feedback on tonight really are those 4 areas that are listed in my report on the third page, I think, item 14B. And that is, how do we treat garages as to height and location? And how do we treat what the current ordinance does is essentially discourage and prohibit future residential housing in the C1 core commercial district. And basically would essentially, by enacting that ordinance, would create nonconformity for all residential houses in the C1 district. And essentially create a situation where those houses could not be rebuilt if they were, for example, destroyed by fire more than 50%. The ordinance would prohibit them being rebuilt. Would also prohibit any enhancement of those houses beyond by as a matter of right. And if the expansion exceeded, I think it's 120 square feet under the current ordinance. So wanted some feedback on that.
Do you want to do this one at a time, or?
I think so. Yeah, that'd be.
I mean, well, we talked about 2, and I have comments on both of them.
But what I would like is
Okay.
some feedback that can give me the information about how we might structure language that could be inserted into the ordinance and put it in a position where you were able to enact it finally and completely. These were areas that the the planning commission thought were of broad enough scope that they needed your input rather than just, their recommendation. That makes sense.
So, if I can go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
In terms of the garages as to height and location, we kind of saw this, recently with the Hamley build down on Fifth Street, where they went and built a 32-foot, 2-story garage, but because it's a whatever you call it, an adjunct building, they only had to have an 8-foot setback, and that really kind of is a harsh thing for the neighbors to deal with. I think that my strong feeling is that if the garage is going to be 2 stories, it should have to conform to the same setback requirements as a primary residence. Because that's why we have that. I mean, it almost looks like in Hamley's case that the living space above their garage is almost as big as their primary living space on their ground floor of their main house. And so you gotta ask yourself, if that's the case, why do we have these setback requirements in the first place? And we have them for a reason. And so I think they should be, if it's gonna be 2 stories, it should have the same setbacks as the primary. If it's 1 story, we've always had 8 feet. Seems to be okay.
I could address how the new ordinance tends to, or tries to deal with that. And it's by very, I think, rigid or rigorous definitions of what an accessory dwelling is versus a garage. And I think it is defined, the planning commission did a really good job in defining the 2 of those things differently. So you would not, you could still have a 35-foot garage, but if it was intending to be a
dwelling.
Storage only.
right, it was anything other than storage.
Yeah, I mean, you can see how that's gonna, once it's built, they'll convert it. And so that's the obvious,
And with the public comment that we got, that was basically exactly what they were saying, is that would
people will
lead
cheat.
to that situation.
And it's gonna be a lot harder to enforce once it's already built. And so like, oh, that's just storage, and then we'll, wait a minute, why are you putting plumbing upstairs, and why does it need 16 outlets? And so, I just think you're asking for trouble. You should just cut it off at 2 stories. Now, like storage joists in a garage or an open floor or an open roof, that's a different thing, but if you're gonna have an actual second story, I think that should be in the ordinance, that it should have the same setbacks as a primary residence. I don't think that's that hard to figure out or word. And I think it makes an awful lot of sense based on what we've seen in practical applications recently. And that's only gonna get worse if we don't fix it. So that's my 2 cents on that, and I hope I have people's agreement. I see a lot of shaking heads, so that's good. In terms of the second one, the residential housing in C1, it's kind of funny because I can see how this backfires. I was driving around Traverse today, and we're out in a commercial district, and Rich goes, "Oh, I've never noticed that little house there before." It's this tiny little house that was probably built in the 40s. And it's a real piece of junk. It's really ugly. But somebody's gonna hang on to that house and they're never gonna update it. They're never gonna remodel it. It's just gonna look like this ugly little house because they're not allowed to. Because of the zoning in Traverse City that doesn't allow for people to modify residential and commercial. I understand the purposes that they would like to get rid of all the houses in Northport. I don't necessarily agree with that, but especially if you allow them to be modernized and to be cool, and like what this guy's gonna do down next to the post office. His plans are awesome, and I don't think we should be going against that. I have dreams of doing something similar with my house, I mean, full disclosure, but we're nowhere near it at this point. But I don't think it should be discouraged. And then the other thing is, if you're presently in a house and your house burns down, you're not allowed to rebuild it. That's just blatantly, patently unfair. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. You have to leave town. I mean, no, I don't think we should have anything to do with that.
If I can.
Yeah.
On kind of on behalf of the planning commission discussion, when this was brought to our attention. I think that the commissioners wanted to grandfather in the existing properties, find language.
But
that-
grandfathering them in how, and that would be to
That
future
any-
owners?
Yeah, any residential, anything that's currently residential.
Okay, but what about renovations in excess of 120 feet?
The way that I suggested dealing with that was to indicate that a residential use in existence on the date that the zoning ordinance was adopted shall not be considered non-conforming use.
Yeah, that works.
That would take you out of the formula.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know,
Even for
being
future owners.
limited to 120,
Yeah.
being limited to repair and replacement if it's destroyed by more than 50%. That'd be one way of dealing with it. I can understand the desire to have the ordinance read as it currently does. But I think you've got houses that are of such a significant value that to put them in the position that they're immediately non-conforming because of the change in the zoning ordinance is, I think unfair, really, but.
Laura had her hand up first, sorry.
So I'm speaking for myself and not the whole planning commission, but when I mean, this was a really long discussion when we did have this, and our understanding from our consultant was that we either had to do one or the other. That was our understanding, because we very much did discuss grandfathering through, because we also do not think it is fair to do that. So Jim is the one who has let us know that there are ways to do this. One other thing, if it stays as is, which I don't think it sounds like it's going to, which is fine by me, but is that you could apply for a variance to be beyond the 120 square feet. I mean, like, you could still apply for a variance even if it was as is.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we should have to, because if there is ways to do the language, then that is what we want. What the planning commission discussed at length and would like to not see happen is new houses going in the core district, because
Right.
you've come in and you've bought something and you knock it down and you build a single family home and continue to destroy the street wall and everything else in the downtown district. And that's what we don't want to see happen, which right now you could do.
Okay, so let's talk about an example. When they renovated that building right there and they did a change of use, did they file for a change of use? Oh, right out the window, that went from commercial retail to residential.
To use permitted
It's a use that's currently permitted.
Permitted by right.
by right.
Right, but it wouldn't be under the new zoning.
Correct.
No, well,
right? Because
It really
if a
doesn't.
building is currently commercial, you couldn't knock it down and put a house.
Right.
Well, no, but
If
they
we-
just changed it to full residential, there's gonna be no retail space in there.
But could you use it? Could
It
you
wouldn't
take
be
it as
single
a
family
gas
home.
station and make a house?
I'd have to look at the language, but I think you could argue that would not be a permitted.
It's
use.
single family homes we're talking about, so that would not be considered, I don't think, a single family home.
Well, you could turn it into one, I mean,
I mean, really, I'm just looking at the map. I mean, how many houses are we
There's
talking
12.
about? Yeah, I mean, in full
Well,
disclosure,
13.
mine is one of those too, so
you're not in C1,
yeah,
you're RC1.
I'm C1.
Oh, you are?
I'm red right there on the corner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, just to hear that, like, that would happen is,
Yeah.
concerning.
I swear when I bought my store, it was RC1, and now it's C1. I've looked at it, and I'm like, wait, when did that
I mean,
change?
my question was going to be from a planning I don't know anything about urban planning or city planning or village planning, but why don't we want people having houses in the core?
So it's to create a more downtown looking district with all your businesses in one road rather than having mixed use of business and single family residence and business and single family
I
residence.
think it's the way it is.
The
I
way
mean,
it
Bar
is,
Sharp Ventier on the corner, isn't that spectacular and
What
Tim.
shop on the
Well,
corner?
yeah,
but that, I guess it's not planners don't think that's a good thing to have residences mixed in.
Imagine Ann Arbor, like downtown Ann Arbor, you wouldn't want, you're walking around in a commercial district and all of a sudden there's a colonial house or, or modular house,
And
like,
Ann Arbor had that situation.
Yeah.
And zoned against it
yeah.
and ultimately over time,
That's the other thing people need to realize, that it does take a long time for, even if you went with the draconian, which I'm calling it draconian, it would still take, probably nobody in this room would still be alive by the time we would lose a single house.
mhm.
Because nobody's gonna tear them down, they're just not gonna improve them, which I think is a detriment to the village, because there are a few that could use a facelift and really make the town look better, and mine included. I gave it one 14 years ago, it's time for another one, so. I think in a town like this, you're actually gonna hurt the character of the town more for the next 50 years than you're gonna get any benefit from it.
if you hurt the town if what?
If we don't allow people to upgrade their houses if they're in the C1.
But the point of having a C1 is to have a commercial district, so that people can walk around and do business in the town. And
Right, and
not
have
have to walk
density.
here, there, and.
No, and if you look back at one of the things back in 2008, if you read the group study they did where they got everybody together, I think it was at the high school and stuff. And one of the detriments that Northport has is that the downtown district is spread out too much. But I don't think you're gonna change that. And I don't think there's a fair way to change that. I think that's just the way it is. If things boom, you will see, you'll see some residential houses get bought and demolished and a commercial structure put in. I'm not sure what the future of downtowns, looks like, because being in retail now, going up against Amazon and all that, it's hard. If they looked at, like, they couldn't think of a single thing they could put in there for retail space that this town needs that they could sell. That they won't get slaughtered on the internet. So for me, it's kind of unrealistic for some of these planners sometimes to say, oh, we need a sidewalk wall. Well, good luck filling those storefronts. We don't need a sidewalk wall full of empty buildings, that's for damn sure. And so I really don't think we need to do this. I don't think we should do it at all. I think we should say what you said.
I think it's reasonable.
Let the
to
market
say
do it.
nothing new like that.
Yeah,
It's reasonable to say that.
yes. Yeah, you don't want to see somebody tear down Tom's and put up a McMansion. So this would prevent that.
But to grandfather in the existing 12 houses.
Yeah,
And in perpetuity,
Well,
so for subsequent.
until they change the zoning ordinance.
Exactly.
It can always be changed.
Be careful the way you use terms here.
Oh, perpetuity
When you use
is
the
not-
term grandfathering,
Oh,
that's
Yeah.
basically what non-conforming non-conforming use is.
Yeah.
Is You're saying,
Right,
you're making it illegal, but you're saying you can keep it until it's gone.
Mhm.
That's what
That's
grandfathering
grandfathering, yes.
is. What we're saying is, it's not non-conforming, that it's a lawful use
by right.
by right, as long as it existed before the zoning ordinance was enacted.
No, I think that's a perfect
And
amendment.
it's
I'm
status-
1000% in favor of
Yeah.
what you're saying.
And it's what,
And it stayed as that use.
yes, yeah, you're right, it's stated that use. That's a good point.
Because it's not like if, for example, your residence was a residence for you, but then it was sold and somebody was doing it as a commercial business, somebody else then down the line can
Couldn't-
buy it and
They
say
could
it's a
take
house.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my house could be converted in, I thought, it would make a great lawyer's office, a dentist's office. It would, you could build out down the hill and you could terrace it, and it would actually make a really nice restaurant and bar, but in that spot, and if somebody wanted to give me $2 million to buy my house to do that, I'd take it, and that's the market doing it, not the zoning.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so if Northport starts to boom like Leland, and all these downtown houses are worth more as a commercial property than they are as a house, fine, then we get to that point. But we get to that point by the free market, and the people choosing to sell their house instead of not being able to keep up with.
And not being able to sell their house.
That's
So-
true too.
so
Well,
I-
yeah, well, no, they could still sell it under if it was
Only
non-conforming.
But we're limiting its
Yeah,
potential value.
Right, oh,
To,
you're
to
definitely
the
doing
market, which is, I mean,
But I will say this, a house that is a non-conforming use in its zoning district may be difficult to either insure or get a mortgage.
Yeah, it would probably hurt property value a little bit. Or a lot.
Well,
And
it's not
that's-
so much whether it hurts the property value, because the property value probably will go up as the market increases, and it has.
Not if you're gonna have trouble with a mortgage or insurance, I mean, then that takes the price down.
It makes it difficult to sell.
Yeah, that's.
Even if your value has increased, it just makes it difficult to sell.
Right.
Which is practically the same thing. So it sounds like there is some consensus regarding if there is a consistent residential use prior to and after the enactment of the zoning ordinance, that it can be treated as a lawful use.
Yes,
And it also means the person can sell that house to another person who wants to use it as residence.
oh, yeah. It would not be nice. Okay, good.
The other two are a little more esoteric, and I'm not sure I really, and maybe Nicole or someone else on the planning commission can give some more on the transient housing needed use, but the issue on number 3 was the treatment of lighting and zoning is really not so much whether I think the language of the existing ordinance is adequate or appropriate for a zoning ordinance. The issue really was, do we want or should we pursue essentially a nuisance ordinance as well to address that issue? That I think is, as I understand the issue, is what we need some direction on.
If I can kick this one off.
sure.
We, when Leelanau County, with whatever they did, they repealed their nuisance ordinance, and we have been relying on it. We have no nuisance ordinance and no way of addressing excessive late night noise, a number of other things in addition to lighting. And I think that adopting a nuisance ordinance overall is a good idea. We currently have language in the proposed zoning ordinance that doesn't apply to residential lighting. And our current ordinance, not that we, does have limits. That was an oversight. So what we were looking to do is correct the oversight in the language in the lighting section of the zoning ordinance. Ask the council to adopt it while we further research creating a nuisance ordinance. You might then be able to remove some of the general provisions from the zoning ordinance that talk about smoke and noise and light and glare. Because it would no longer be, it could become a village ordinance that's then enforceable.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, so you would like me to go ahead with the preparation of of the nuisance ordinance that addresses the issues that Jay has raised them?
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure.
I'll have that on the agenda.
And the correction to the current, and it's just like one sentence.
Of the.
Of the proposed,
Proposed.
zoning ordinance.
Okay, we'll get together on
Yeah.
that then. Okay, and the last one is the transient housing and ADUs, and
Yeah, I went back to the minutes, Jim, and I said the table of permitted uses by zoning district will be corrected to require a special use permit for transient housing in all districts. I think we left that off,
okay,
and I don't know.
that's the only issue that you wanted
Yeah.
to. Do you understand what we're
What's the
talking about?
definition of transient housing? Is that an STR?
Well, it would be basically.
It's 28 days or less.
Yeah, 20 days or less, I think is what it says in the ordinance, but.
So everybody in the village is gonna have to have a special use permit to do an STR?
that's
They do
proposed.
already.
Well, is that in the zoning now? That's not. in the
No,
zoning.
that's village.
It's a village ordinance.
But I think the,
Short-term rentals require
But
a
I-
permit and a special land use permit.
but it's not,
Not in commercial though.
to my knowledge, we don't treat them in the same way that a special land use that would have to be approved by the planning commission.
The zoning,
Zoning board.
the zoning was amended to have it a use permitted by right. It was special use permit at one time, you are correct. And then it
But
was
it's now, this is as a matter of fact.
five special use.
It's-
That seems a little bit at cross purposes from what we need to have a use by right.
Well, unless and until this is the thing that I thought, that, you know, I wasn't on the planning commission, I didn't have anything to do with this proposed zoning ordinance. I don't know when or if we're ever gonna do an STR overlay zone. I'm very much in favor of it. It has stood up in the courts. And it seems to be the only thing nationwide that works. And so I don't know why we haven't done it already, and I don't know why it's not part of this, but it isn't. But we could add it later. And I think that's where we really want to head is, I don't think we need to take on STRs right now in the current proposed ordinance, because I think we're gonna do an overlay zone. I think once everybody understands what it is and how well it works in other places, nobody will vote against it, and it's just a matter of drafting it and passing it.
I think that I would agree with everything you said. I would add one additional thing. The other type of ordinance that I think does work and work effectively is a limitation as to number, license ordinance and a limitation as to number. And the reason that, and I'm not saying whether I like it or not, I'm saying it's an effective use because the way municipalities that have done it and have done it effectively is they study what their current market is, and then they cap it at or around that market. And so if you have it, you're permitted to keep it, essentially what we just talked about with residential uses in the C1 core district. If you have it, you're permitted to keep it, but if you essentially give it up, it's gone. If you sell, and that's essentially what Sutton's Bay does. If you sell.
Well, you can get back on the list where there's a waiting list, I assume.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that's- and the reason they're overlay district, I'll make sure that everybody understands what it is.
Yeah, what's the difference between the two?
Two
Oh, it's a big
differences.
difference.
You can an ordinance that limits as to number doesn't necessarily have to be a zoning ordinance issue.
True.
It's a licensing, police power licensing ordinance.
Hmm.
And it basically says you can have anywhere in the village, but they're limited as to number. The overlay district would say you can only have an ADU with, or
That's
short-term rentals within the area defined by the
Oh,
overlay.
so in a way,
So there,
limiting the number of units
Yeah,
that
I
could
don't think we
be,
need to have STRs up on Ransom Street, and, you know, I own a property on Ransom Street that I could convert to an STR, I'd probably be a lot more profitable than it
Sure.
is, but I don't think it has any business being there.
yeah, sorry.
And so-
You could actually, both, frankly, you could do both.
You could
and
do both.
Limit as to number and location.
Mm-hmm,
But I think that kind of a decision is, in fairness to the planning commission, they were not charged with doing anything
I know.
like that. And there was a suggestion that there would be a short-term rental committee that would deal with that. And I kind of dropped the ball on that, to be honest, but,
Yeah, because it wasn't a suggestion, it was a decision to
It
do
was a
that with the
decision.
numbers and everything. But, and that's all stuff that was to be discussed there, so that it can see what really is our issue at hand, what is the problem before we try to
Yes, I
solve
have to
something that we
say,
don't have the answer.
I do not know what we're talking about when we're talking, this zoning ordinance, what does it do? What would it do? I understand it's about STRs, but what would it,
What would what do?
This-
That's not in this right now.
no, what we're talking about, transient
housing
housing and ADUs.
that's, we're talking about the
Yeah.
two things, with the overlay district, and then he's talking
The
about.
overlay district is not in the.
But that is not
No.
what we're talking about right now. We're talking about.
This particular terminology is confusing, and it's not something that we needed to discuss as a council. It was something that was identified by the planning commission to require a special use permit, and the definition of transient housing is, the zoning ordinance doesn't define short-term rentals, does it?
I don't think so. I mean, it's I
Are we getting off topic?
Yeah.
No,
I don't
Okay,
think
I
so.
just want to make sure that we're not
But I thought
losing
Julie
the
said that
discussion. Okay,
special use permits are already required or used to be required.
no, you need a,
I'm sorry.
Joni,
You're both
Joni,
answering.
go ahead, Joni.
Under my tenure as the zoning administrator, I know that there was a amendment to the zoning to include short-term rentals as a use by right in all districts. At one time, it was a special use permit process that you had to go to the planning commission and apply for.
But that's not true anymore.
Not at this time.
But we want to restore that.
The thought is, I guess that's the question,
Yeah.
whether we
What's the
want to
best way to do it?
restore that, but the broader question, or the narrower question, is transient housing to me could be somebody parking in RV somewhere.
Maybe
Um,
the best solution would be to enact the zoning ordinance without any changes in this area, and then do address it with the task force. Because that's really the problem, is
I agree.
we were so involved with the zoning ordinance. Task force could have been working at cross purposes to the zoning and the planning commission. So once we define what the zoning ordinance is going to be, then I think we can proceed with.
That would be my suggestion, is to leave it out for now, just leave the transient stuff out. Because it's gonna open a can of worms, and it may work at cross purposes to what the,
So right now, we have no requirement for anything for STRs.
Yeah, it's a registration.
it's the Wild West.
They should register.
Are they still,
Must.
are people still registering?
Yeah.
There's no penalty for non-registration. There's no, it's,
Not really.
and there's no fee for registering.
So the idea of a registration is to at least build a database of what you've got.
Right. I understand.
And essentially what we've been telling people, as I understand it before I came here, was you register, because when we enact an ordinance, those that are registered will be considered to.
Grandfathered in.
Yeah.
They want.
And this time, we mean the grandfather
Yeah.
definition, because the next owner would not have that right. So that's exactly why I like the overlay. It wouldn't, anybody who's doing it now wouldn't lose what they're doing, but the next
Put
owner
them in
would
the
be.
old.
Mhm.
So it's
Okay,
I have it all.
We have registered
yes,
45 within the village.
there's probably more than that,
People do want to be on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
For that.
for that reason.
Okay.
All right, that covers the list.
Laura's got some.
Yeah, I have comments on the first one, just because
Yeah.
Will went and then went to the next one, but, one thing that I wanted to clarify, I mean, one thing that we did do, I very much agree with your comment that if we are going to allow people to put a garage that then becomes a dwelling, to have a variance and an exception to our rule, then what is the point of having the rule at all? One thing that I do want to be sure people understand though, is that this zoning in the residential districts, depending on which district you're in, your setbacks are different, but currently in like R2, which is a vast majority of the area, your side setbacks have to be a total of 20, combining the two sides with a minimum of 8.
Yeah.
And so then the other side 12. That is right now, what is proposed is changed to 15 with a minimum of 5 and 10 on the other as a possibility. The back used to be 30, that is proposed to be 20. So we're already like reducing what that is so that people can have more space to use their lots. This exception then takes it even further and still gives them that they could be the 8 foot. We tried and in my opinion have put in place as much as we can so that it would not be used as a dwelling. And that if you were doing that, you're not going to be approved. But I do want to be sure that you understand that what is already there is changing the general rules. Because I don't think, and we've had this discussion a lot, that a 30-foot setback in the rear is necessary anymore because we don't have septics.
Right.
And I very much agree that we don't want people putting dwellings all the way up to the edge, and if we do, then we should just make that the setbacks.
I don't
Period.
know why you guys
But-
reduced it to 5.
Because the lot, the minimum lot width was
Got
reduced.
smaller.
to 50,
To 50 from 100.
And you can't fit a.
Yeah, the reductions of the general, setbacks, I think are appropriate. I think really it does boil down to this question of an 8-foot setback for what could potentially become an occupied portion of.
Well,
I
it's
also
5
think-
feet now.
Well, on the side.
On the side.
Yeah,
But that's what it is gonna be anyway for anything, and that would be allowed to be
Yeah,
a dwelling,
that's true.
because that's the general setback. What I think, and my concern and the reason that we left it there is that if we're going to say that because a garage is okay, because it doesn't have the same lighting, it doesn't have the same use, it doesn't have the same noise at nighttime and all of these things, then I don't think it's necessarily right to say, well, because somebody else or you might be trying to break the rules later, then we're gonna say you can't do that at all now and you don't get to have a second story because I'm concerned that you're going to cheat. And while I get that that's a possibility, it also bothers me because if I was the homeowner, I am not intending to cheat and I don't get to have extra storage because somebody else is going to. And that's my frustration.
that's not really I think it's not really whether it's residential so much. I mean, honestly, it's the height of the thing, and maybe we should just.
And
keep
right
it
now, the
single
height of
story.
the garage has
I
to
don't
be
care what you
shorter than the
consider.
height of the house.
Yeah,
Is what
by
the
how
zoning says.
much? An inch?
Yeah, there's
It
a
doesn't
lot
say.
of-
That's a
there's
good point,
There's a
but-
lot of houses that do have 2-story garages that are used for storage only. There's a lot of that, and I'd even approve something
Well,
that did that.
they could still conform to setbacks. I mean, it's because your neighbors are gonna have this thing, right in their face, this is what I'm seeing and what happened. And yes, those people lied to this zoning board through their teeth to get what they wanted.
Yeah.
Honestly,
And
honestly, the
And
difference.
people will lie in
Well,
the
and
future.
that garage is taller than the house, and that was the way it was proposed. I mean, like, there's so many things about that example that are wrong. But I do think that it's a matter of 12 feet, because like, there's the 8-foot exception that would be allowed for garages, or it's gonna be 20 foot, and there's
Right.
12 feet more that you get on the backside. And so if people are that concerned about that, then that's what it'll be,
Yeah,
but,
and I would argue that the difference between 12 feet and 8 feet, when you're talking about a 35-foot structure, is 0.
I
The difference is not
agree,
significant.
I don't think it's.
But if it's occupied and has lighting, then, because the members of the public that were addressing this issue to the planning commission, that's the issue they were concerned about primarily. Was that it was that if it's a two-story, it's capable of being occupied, there'll be lighting, and it'll be interfering with my use of the property that way, not just by its height.
Well, okay, those are both valid concerns, but the other thing that bothers me that just came out is that there is no requirement, that's, okay, the garage has to be shorter than the house, but it doesn't say about how much, maybe there should be a percentage, like 20% shorter or something like that.
Cannot exceed
Well, I mean, what is your purpose in doing that? That it does not exceed the height of the house or that it is shorter than the house? Because if it doesn't, I mean, you don't have to say how, if it says shorter, it can be. an
It
inch.
says it can't exceed the height of the house, yeah, and if it's attached, then it's different. If
Yeah.
it's detached is what they're talking about, and it does specify and go into that detail.
I'm just trying to protect the
So-
neighbors, like,
and-
when they, so they don't get something put right in their faces that's 35 feet high that doesn't have the same setbacks as a primary residence. I mean, I don't, there's a reason we have those setbacks and
There's also a reason they put the exception in though, the exception's been there forever too.
I
And
don't
that's
think
why
it's
we
a good
changed
exception.
all the, yeah, well, and that's, I mean, and that's a reasonable opinion to have. I just think that, the exception was there to try and allow people to have more use of their property in areas where there might be the need for it because of the fact that their lots aren't as big. Because they're in the downtown or adjacent areas.
What I would recommend, because this one, it sounds like you don't really have immediate consensus, so maybe what would be best is to present the ordinance to
Two
you
ways.
as it is, and you can decide it at that point.
I gotta say, it's not necessarily a bad idea to do a percentage of how much height can you get off of it, because right now it's 35 feet, right, is the height of your house, that's the limit. Is that correct? I think it's 35, yeah, and we are keeping it there. And that includes like, even if it's just a really tall gable, right, like that's the height, and if you're doing and want a two-story house or garage, you're gonna have to have a tall house, and right now, I mean, that's what happened with your example, is that they were very close to each other, the garage is taller, but.
So you're suggesting something like a garage couldn't exceed 80% of the height of the.
Here's, I mean, I don't know, I mean, you probably need to look to see what these numbers actually are, to see if you can
I'm
fit a
not-
two-story
not-
house in it,
I'm
but.
not trying to suggest a particular number, but you're talking about something like that the garage can't exceed a certain percentage of the main house.
Right, that's what you were saying.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I threw out a number without knowing, I think a builder would know more what you can do with 20% or whether that makes any sense. It's kind of like our 7-foot fence ordinance, the fences come in 6 or 8. So we have a 7-foot fence, so I don't want to do something arbitrary like that because I don't have the knowledge of what actually makes sense.
But you would, sounds like there is a development consensus on the idea, if you access the 8-foot setback, that a limitation on height by a percentage of the principal dwelling would be something you could all agree on.
Yeah,
potentially,
Yeah.
and still keep all of the verbiage that we have that it cannot be a dwelling. Because I mean, that we worked and I
It would
So-
make it
firmly.
much more.
Because a lot of that,
difficult
you're
for
right, a
someone
lot of that is gonna come down to the question of roof pitches and how joists are constructed and all of that. And an input from a builder would be very helpful.
So we're saying that this would limit people's ability to use the second floor for housing.
in practical terms, yes. In practical terms, it would, yeah.
Well,
Do
I
we wanna
also
do
think
that?
what we're trying to say is, yes, we don't want dwellings, if you are, I mean, to me, if you're doing a dwelling and you want to have it usable as a space to live in or rent out, then you need to follow the regular setbacks, because otherwise, why do we even have, then we should just make it an 8-foot setback.
Another,
Setbacks.
if I could say.
Will, go ahead.
Another reason this is really important is because we got rid of the 100-foot rule and now it's 50 feet. And that, I'm not really actually in favor of that. I'm not, maybe I voted for it, I don't know. But I know the idea was to promote more affordable housing, but growing up in Chicago suburbs, you get 50 feet apart, you're getting into row houses and it really changes the neighborhood, not for the better. It's really not aesthetically pleasing. You're like the blue house down on Fifth. It just got wedged in between those two, with no, and they cheated on their setbacks too, in fact. But that, it just packs things in. It's just such an aesthetically as unpleasing a house as I can imagine, and I think in the quest to make affordable housing by, limiting, by allowing 50 feet, you really gotta think about what you're doing to the character of the town overall. And I don't think it's positive. I mean, I don't think it's worth it. It makes the town ugly. And so,
I
and then if
disagree
you,
with
and then
that.
if you're gonna forgive setbacks on garage buildings with apartments in them, then you're really jamming stuff in there. And you're gonna get a very urban feel to a village that is not a suburb. And I think you really gotta proceed with caution here. I don't think it was a good idea. Maybe 75 feet, I don't know. That's hard because you can't split lots that way, but, I think we may have jumped too fast on the 50-foot thing to begin with, and now we really have to be careful on setbacks because you're allowing people just to cram as much stuff as they can into a tiny, postage stamp sized lot.
There's a percentage that can.
I know, but setbacks are still important for the breathing, so there's space, and I think we're going too far.
Well, every district didn't get rezoned that way. I
Good.
mean, like, that isn't what we're proposing. It's only the one that is closest to the core districts. So that is the R2.
Okay,
And then there are differences in the R2S, which is why we changed that section, and that's a new zone. And that's the waterfront R2, because we didn't want that to have to apply all of the things that we were changing and doing. So, I mean, to me, I do not feel that that is what we have done with what we're proposing at
Well,
all.
okay, fair enough, but I still just want to put that word of caution out there that, okay, you have allowed this in R2. Be careful that you don't go too far. And, I know affordable housing, but we just don't want to pack people in.
Well, they can live further out.
That's what I would like to see, is I'd like to see the township start forgiving some 10-acre things in the perimeter of the village, so we
Yeah,
can,
no,
expand.
but-
That's how
but-
villages grow.
But how to do affordable housing is you have to put more houses in a smaller area.
Or,
That's how I
get
know.
more area. We're,
No.
right now, everything's ag, it's zoned agriculture, so the minute you get out of the village, you can only put one house on 10 acres, that doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, it,
It is ag.
Okay, yeah, well,
What-
I was just gonna say, let's pull
Yeah,
the
we gotta-
discussion back. We do have a lot to get to on the agenda yet still, just looking at the second page. What did you want to say?
It was just, it's like how we came to that, and it was part of our consult, and the idea is taking a look at our districts and have them be more graduated than they were, and so more dense, in close where we have these closer lots, and then as Laura said, the shoreline, we said, no, we absolutely don't want that at 50 feet, we wanna make sure that's protected.
Okay.
And we increased the R1, which is the rural residential where I built, that's now a 2-acre minimum, and the idea is you start from this dense in the village all the way out to the 10-acre, and maybe that 10-acre has to move to 5.
Okay, and I'll defer to you guys, I'll defer to the planning commission that's actually studied this stuff, and I'm just sitting here shooting from the hip, so,
But that's-
I'm gonna shut up now. And you can,
Item C.
Actually, what I'd recommend on that, because and frankly, this has been really, really helpful discussion for me. It gives me direction on where we can go on particularly the zoning ordinance. We'll have it ready for you to consider for final approval at the next meeting. We could defer items 14C and D. They'll be on, we can put them on the next agenda, because I really only wanted some feedback again. And neither of these are really
no.
of any immediate importance. So we could defer those. And if you'd like to move directly to item 15A, the approval of the 2024-25 fiscal year budget, which we do want to hold the.
Mr. President, if you allow, I will move the approval of the 24-25 budget resolution as presented.
Second.
And open a public hearing for comment.
All right, so it's moved by Will, supported by Susan to approve the 2024-2025 fiscal year budget. And so now we'll open the public hearing for the budget. If there's any public comment, you can unmute yourself and I'll recognize you. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. And seeing no public comment. Is there a resolution to read or?
Yeah,
There is.
So approval of,
move approval of the resolution as presented was what I
okay,
was,
It's on the floor.
yep, okay. So any discussion? Okay, so we'll go with a roll call vote. Starting with Will,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes,
Laura,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes,
and yes. Motion passes. Budget approved.
thank you, Joan.
That takes everybody here, so, but it takes a village.
Yeah.
Sorry.
definitely do this.
Yes, it was.
And then the
Thank you.
other, the next item, and to make sure you understand why we've done it this way, we had the option, and I discussed this with the finance committee. We had the option of taking these, what we're calling budget amendments, and including them in the budget that you just approved with some modifications in that. But we thought it would be best to show this is exactly how we're going to proceed with these in the future, and presenting to you the projects that either come from staff or from our committees that's currently constituted to amend the budget. What you'll be getting is a proposal that talks about the project, describes total project costs, and gives you funding sources that they're coming from. Now, both at the finance committee and before this body, we talked about playground equipment and more or less came to a consensus that this is what we would do. Now you're in a position to actually say, we're approving it, we're gonna make it part of the 2024, 2025 budget and authorize us to make those transfers and to make those payments when they come due. The other two projects are things that came up really primarily because for the striping of the major and local streets, the vendor that we're proposing to use is already, they were approved by both MDOT and Leelanau County Road Commission. And they were already in Leelanau County doing the striping of the MDOT streets. And they were in here doing things like crosswalks and that sort of thing. And we approached them and asked for a quote, and they provided us with one. The same thing with the village office parking lot out here to seal and stripe it. The golf course had sought a bid, and we went to them and said, can you do them both at the same time? And if you did, can you basically give us a break on that? And they came up with a total project cost of $2,400. And for each of those, we've indicated again, the project and the funding sources. And I would ask that you authorize us to move forward, approve these as changes to the budget, and we'll so amend it as you've already approved it, and proceed with these three projects. And as I think I indicated in my report, you could approve them all at once as a budget transfer or amendment proposal, or take them up one at a time as you said.
I move approval of budget amendments 1, 2, and 3 as presented.
Second.
Moved by Jane, supported by Will to approve budget amendments 1, 2, and 3 as presented. Any discussion?
Yeah,
Oh. I called on her first. I didn't see her hand.
I said this in finance, but I want to be sure that when project 2 is happening, that we be sure that we look at where those lines are and we don't just do what it's always been, but we be sure we're improving and meeting MDOT standards for the striping of entrances and exits.
Yeah, and for the record, those are we have a lot of frankly non-compliant.
Yep.
They're right out here.
Yes.
It goes right to the edge of the parking lot. It's impossible to see around that, around any vehicle that's parked there.
that might have been from COVID where they put the tables out in the street.
It may very well have
That might be a
may
hangover.
very well have been, and to address Laura's issue, that's exactly what we've talked with staff fact, I think we've even made contact with the vendor on that
Yeah,
issue.
he's sending me the regulations.
So,
And we can take a walk down there and take a look at that. It's great.
yeah, and we're also indicating that myself and Chris Holton will be involved with with the.
I was gonna say, I have great faith in our DPW superintendent to be overseeing this.
To make
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
He'll be all over.
He'll be
it.
involved.
Yeah.
And not on Fridays, he'll be at the farmer's market.
Right. Already got those things in mind.
My only question was, and it's not really related to these things, in terms of discussion, but does this mean we're giving up on the temporary bathroom or?
Oh, God,
Okay,
no.
all right.
No, in fact,
These are
I just saw interestingly enough, a Michigan grant opportunity came through for public health infrastructure.
Good.
So what I'm trying to figure out, would it make sense to put something temporary in for this year? Or should we buy one of those?
Well, wouldn't we have to do a fund transfer? Wouldn't we have to prove that
We
tonight?
have to do- No, you don't have to do that tonight. You can approve that at any time.
Even retroactively, like we want it in before Fourth of July. So, the next meeting is July.
I
I didn't know that.
hadn't considered that we would try to get it in by the 4th of
Oh,
July.
okay, I just thought that was common sense. All right, never mind, that was not related, so let's
Well, it's
vote.
very possible that we could, there are funds available that we wouldn't need to do a transfer. But
Okay.
Okay.
I'm done. We can vote.
Okay. All right, so back to moved by Jane, supported by Will. We gotta do a roll call, right? Yeah, so roll call vote starting with Susan.
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes,
Will,
Yes,
and yes, motion passes. All right, next up, we have item B, schedule a public hearing on a variance request for 109 Rose Street.
yep.
I'll move and set a public hearing before the zoning board of appeals for variances relating to 109 Rose Street to be held.
At the next regular meeting.
Yes.
Of this-
the
of the
next-
village
Yeah,
council.
yes, village council meeting in July 11th.
I'll support that.
Moved by Barb, supported by Will to schedule a public hearing for the variance request for 109 Rose Street at the next regular village council meeting scheduled July 11, 2024. Any discussion?
Just make sure that the proper notices go out. We've run into that problem before.
Okay.
And my question is, what is this about? What is this project? What is Jim gonna do?
it's a renovation to what was actually my former law partner's family had a.
Is this Edie Jobs?
Yes, you job just.
Yes, and to basically turn that into a residential. And it requires some variances primarily because it's close to the Northport Creek.
Okay,
That's,
understand.
that's the main issue. And one of the variances might relate to, I just talked to the owner of the property today, might relate to the, he's considering adding a second story. And that would require a stairway, an external stairway. Or that would require, if his proposed use would require a second stair. He's trying to decide whether he'll do that or not.
Without getting too far into the weeds, is that gonna conform to the zoning ordinance we're gonna vote on that same night?
He's already
Well, it's a
got,
variance anyway,
yeah, it's
so,
a variance, but he already has an approved land use permit for.
okay, so he's in.
So he's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, that's
Hey,
cool.
Chris,
C1.
Chris,
Yeah,
can I make a comment on this?
sure, Hugh.
Even though it says 109 Rose Street, we've been dispatched to this location before, and their address, they say, is 109 Bay Street.
Yeah,
So
we probably need to clarify that, but that doesn't make an issue, or that doesn't prevent us from approving a variance.
No, but it's really important in the noticing because we ran into that problem before, with Hanley, we had the wrong address since we had to postpone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we gotta get that right before we
I'll
send
make
those
sure
out.
that both addresses are used, because
Yeah, I think you can do that.
I think that's what I, in
Interesting.
fact, I meant to refer to that refer to it that way in this report, just didn't.
Do we need to change what we approved to base?
No. We just had a meeting.
Any other discussion? All right, Don't be a roll call for this, right? Let's spend your money? No, okay, so all in favor of, scheduling the public hearings for next, regular council meeting in July, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nays? All right, motion passes. Next up, we have approval of the planning commission annual report.
I'll move we accept and file the 2023 Planning Commission Annual Report as presented.
Second.
Moved by Barb, supported by Will, to approve and file the 2024 annual planning commission report. Any discussion?
I'd just like to commend Nicole for pulling together a comprehensive report. We've made some strides in completing an annual report that meets the planning enabling act requirements.
All right, anything else? All right, thank you. So it was moved by Barb, supported by Will, to approve the planning commission annual report. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next up, we have appointments to the planning commission. All right, so we have, one vacancy, with the term ending in April 2026. And for that, vacancy, my nomination is Hugh Scott. Did you receive the email with his letter of interest today? Okay. And so,
And he did stop by to introduce himself to the trustees who were present before he headed out to the township hall.
mhm.
I've known you for long enough this time to produce.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, so my nomination, do I need support for that, or would somebody want to support my nomination of Hugh Scott?
It's my friend, I want to.
Okay.
And I think you can move to accept the nomination and then Will can.
There we go.
There we go, okay.
I'll move to accept the nomination of Hugh Scott to the planning commission for the term ending April in 2026.
Any discussion?
I've known him for 40 years. He's gonna be great. He's very, very, very bright, very well educated. Jim's met him. I think he's gonna be a huge, huge asset to the planning commission.
His credentials look
Yeah.
like a really good fit.
All right, so all in favor of the appointment of Hugh Scott to the planning commission, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, thank you.
We do have another vacancy.
We do, which I'm hoping to fill here, but in the meantime, John Woomer has accepted or was willing to accept another 2 years on the planning commission, so he would be another nomination to reappoint him to a term ending of April 2026.
I confirm who's moving to service.
So there are three, yeah. the
Oh, 3 years?
terms are 3 years.
Okay.
So,
27.
Okay,
Yeah, this would be
So-
April
27.
2022.
yeah, and,
he could always resign in 26 if he wants to.
That never happens.
So I move to support the nomination of, do we have to do that?
Yeah.
To nominate?
Yes.
I move to support the nomination of John Woomer
To the planning commission.
continue on the planning commission for 3 years.
I'll support that.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all in favor of John Weaver's appointment to the planning commission, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Then you need to replace the full.
I know. All right, so moving on to approval of the 2024 Bremen Bolt event.
I move that we approve 2024 Bremen Bold event on August 31st, 2024 at noon.
Second,
All right, moved by Susan, supported by Barb to approve the 2024 Bremen Bolt event, August 31st, 2024 at 12 noon. Any discussion?
Chris, I'd like to say a little bit.
Yeah, Hugh.
Mr. Scott has always been very easy to work with. I can speak for the DPW as well as the fire department. We will keep this race very safe again, and they are very easy to work with.
They answered all the questions that I had satisfactorily, so, and the administration recommends approval.
Okay, great. So, see, so no, we don't need a roll call vote for this. All in favor of approval of the 2024 Bremen Bolt event, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, approved, good to go. All right. All that, we should have moved it to the first item.
Why did you think she was sitting there?
So she just wanted to see what like municipal.
Yeah.
I might ask for the plan.
There we go, now she's hooked. All right, last up is item F. And if you received the email regarding Mr. Scott, hopefully you saw the nomination I'd like to make for Northport Citizens of the Year would be Andy Thomas and Gloria Thomas.
Move to accept your recommendation. You didn't have this one written out for us, did you? Dang it.
No. Sounds good.
No, I didn't know what it was gonna be.
Of naming, yeah.
And
Gloria Thomas.
And Gloria
as-
Milliken Thomas, I
Yeah.
think we should specify Gloria Milliken Thomas,
Thomas as Citizens of the Year.
second.
All right, any discussion?
It's a great choice.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Next up, we have payment of the bills.
I move we pay the bills totaling $73,467.83 when funds become available.
That's all.
Second.
I have a quick question.
Sure, moved by Susan, supported by Barb for $73,467.83. Discussion.
There's no overtime. Was there actually no overtime or it just didn't get filled
Sorry,
in?
I didn't put it on there, but I can.
Okay, you made my heart go
update.
pitter patter. I thought
Oh,
there was no
yeah.
overtime the whole month. Wow. Okay. I thought it might just have not gotten in.
I'm sorry, yeah.
No, that's okay.
Is there a different amount now?
No, it's
No,
probably
it's
there. She
just
just
how
didn't get
it's
it filled
out.
in.
I'll just-
Cause she has to pull it out.
I always pull out the information on overtime, and it's placed, it's just informational, it doesn't change the total, but
all right,
bills.
thank you.
And I will do that. and
Yeah, no,
send
it's
it.
okay. I just, I knew that it might be that, but I was like, maybe.
All right, any other discussion? Moved by Susan, supported by Barb to approve the payment of the bills. Roll call vote starting with Will.
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
and yes. Bills are paid. Brings us to public comment. If anyone else would like to make public comments, you may do so. Unmute and I'll recognize you. You have 5 minutes to speak.
You know, like,
Sure.
okay, Nicole Arbery, 10915 North Shore. One, just thank you to all of you for your work on the budget. I mean, this is a new process and I think it's going to be really helpful for the village, so appreciate that. And just because I'm sitting here and just as a resident and not part of the planning commission, even though it wasn't on our table, I'm going to just comment about short-term rentals and just go on record saying I would be more in favor of a cap than an overlay. And I should just speak directly to you, Mr. President. The question or the concern for me on an overlay is mostly about optics. And I get exactly what people are saying in terms of, you know, the homes that are most likely to be suited for long-term rentals or that sort of thing. And so, yeah, you wouldn't want those on ransom rent. But the optics that somebody like myself on North Shore with, you know, all the, I can rent and make money off my house. To me, the optics are what is a little bit of the disconnect. And I think a cap could do, you know, everything we need it to do. But that's my only concern about the overlay is the optics of who can make money off their home.
Let's have a beer and talk about that.
Yeah, all right.
Not tonight.
Sounds good. Yeah. Any other public comment? Yeah, seeing no takers, council comment? Any council comment?
Thanks for getting through the meeting really quickly. And I do have one comment I'm gonna make, just, we will get complaints all year long about how we spend our money. And yet we had no public comment on the budget hearing tonight. And that's, from sitting in this chair, that's a little frustrating because not necessarily me, I didn't, but you guys, finance committee and people at this table and Joni and Jim worked really hard on it, and it's easy to, I know by February, we'll have a stack of people that are mad about how we spend our money on something. I was like, well, did you go to the budget hearing? Did you do any public comments? So, that's all, that's my comments. I appreciate all your work, and I wish everybody else did pay attention a little more.
Thanks, Will. Any other council comment? Okay, hearing none, I accept the motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
All right, we'll adjourn. Thank you.
Just,
Oh, blood drive,